for having me here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about our snow and ice management practices, specifically as they relate to chloride. So just a quick outline, I'm going to talk a bit about Shoreview, who we are, where we are, and a bit of our history with snow and ice management. Then I'll jump into some of the techniques we're using right now and some future possibilities, how we're measuring our progress and quantifying those results, some of the challenges we've had with this program and the outreach that we've employed to try and deal with those challenges, and then wrap up with a quick conclusion. So this is Shoreview. For just some context, that logo down there is about where St. Anthony is. So we're about 15 minutes from downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul. We're in the Northeast Metro, about a population of 27,000 people in a 12 square mile area, and about a third of that area is parks and open water. So you can see why we'd be a little concerned about our chloride use in that area. We've got approximately 100 miles of streets that we maintain, and most of our rapid growth occurred in the 70s and 80s, so we do have some aging infrastructure. The big takeaway I want you to get from this slide is that we have very high expectations for community services. If any of you have seen our community center, you might know a little bit about what I'm talking about. So in 1988, we adopted our first official winter maintenance policy to deal with liability issues, as well as consistency and communication between staff and residents. We did start out using a sand-salt blend, which we shudder to think of now, but was common practice at the time. And our operators and managers attended those first training seminars that Brooke and Rachel just talked about to get their certification, and they have continued to do so up until now. And in the mid-2000s, we began to invest in new equipment and technologies. That has also continued throughout. And really, throughout this whole process, the city has encouraged innovation and education to make sure that all of our staff is aware of everything that's going on, of what we can do, and how it applies to Shoreview specifically. So currently, all of our operators and supervisors do go through the MPCA training and receive certification. They get certified in road, parking lot, and sidewalk applications every 5 years, and they audit the seminar every 2 years. So half our staff will go 1 year, half our staff will go the next. Shoreview's actually hosted a couple of those at our maintenance facility in the past. In addition to that, we have an internal annual meeting with our public works staff where they review that training, keep those connections between chloride overusage and environmental degradation fresh in everybody's mind, discuss any new salt use or conservation methods that have come up, and also kind of most importantly, stress that our chloride reduction goals in Shoreview are not budget-based. As this was mentioned, they do obviously, it costs less when you buy less salt, but really we know and our applicators know that they're reducing less salt to help our natural resources. They're aware that not only do the applicators value natural resources, but they're aware that our residents value them as well. And I spoke to our public works superintendent about why he thought that Shoreview and our program in this stood out from our other peer cities who are doing similar good work. And what he said immediately was the training, the fact that all of our applicators buy into the science and the background behind that training. They're aware of what our residents value, and they act accordingly. So that allows him and the other supervisors to provide really, to provide each one of those applicators with really high levels of trust with what they're done to make them, they're aware that they're making the right decisions. And to kind of put that in context or make you believe me a little bit, we've got a 12-person snow and ice management staff at Shoreview Public Works, and 6 of those folks have been around for more than 20 years, and there's several that have been around 10, 11, 12. So we do have a very strong legacy of winter road maintenance in Shoreview and doing that correctly. So some of the techniques that we actually use, we've got an anti-icing, which is a 30% rock salt and water solution that we get from Ramsey County. So that brine is applied to those roads, major roads and intersections under Shoreview jurisdiction. It can only be applied as conditions allow. You have to be reasonably certain that it's going to snow. It has to be dry pavement. It can't be too cold, and you can't have blowing or late snowfall. But when those conditions do allow, it stops the first layer of snow from bonding to the pavement, so it can be really effective. Once we already have snow on the ground, we've got a technique called pre-wetting, where sodium chloride brine tanks are mounted to the side of our plow truck, and that tank will spray out the brine onto the rock salt as it hits that spreader and goes out onto the roadway. That helps it not only activate the salt so melting occurs faster, but it also helps it stick to the road so it doesn't bounce off and end up in those roadside ditches or down a catch basin. So everything in this equipment can be greatly controlled. You can control the speed of the truck, the auger, the spreader, and all of that is really dependent on the conditions. And so every applicator knows that. They go through it in training. And they also rely heavily on the pavement sensors. Depending on what temperature the roadway is at the time and the weather conditions, they definitely can alter their behavior and alter their speed to lay down the correct amount of salt for the correct condition. Just some photos here. You can see the tank on the side of our truck, and a little bit here, it sprays out onto that spreader. You can see the salt coming down, and then this one here in the bottom is just sort of highlights that we've always got those temperature controls or readings there visible, and it does make sense for them to take a look at that. So all of our equipment is calibrated at least once a year at the beginning of the season, and often more than once. Some of our equipment has used for multiple purposes. So if something goes off and gets used for a parks maintenance something, then it comes back before it does any salt application work, all that equipment is recalibrated. We also have a covered salt storage facility that helps reduce weathering of our stockpile, and in that facility there's a dedicated catch basin that leads to a tank, so it catches all of that runoff and leaching, and then that tank water is disposed of properly once a year. So non-equipment techniques that we use, we thoroughly monitor all the weather and conditions heading up to an event and during the event itself. Obviously, you put down different amounts of salt depending on the road temperatures and the weather conditions and the air temperatures as well. Our applicators use a chart by the Freshwater Society that dictates this is your road temperature and this is your condition and this is how much salt you should put down, and that's generally how they practice that. And finally, we also have an automated vehicle management system. So that's just used to track where each vehicle is, how fast they're going, how much salt they've used, and it also tracks long-term weather patterns for analysis. So this here is a picture of our covered storage facility. You can't really see the catch basin, it's right about there, but then there's a tank underneath. And then this is that automated vehicle management system from inside the truck, and then up here it just says, here's your truck number, you've got where it is, the odometer reading, and how many hours it's on the street. Things like that. That's the desktop view from the computer. So into the future, we're looking forward to that automatic vehicle management system is going to be wirelessly, be able to transfer data wirelessly. So right now, we have to take that data and automatic or manually transfer it over, and sometimes, especially in a month like this month, we get a few winter events before we get a chance to look at that data. So everybody's pretty excited that they'll be able to do that in real time. Our managers will be able to see where the trucks are, how fast they're going, and monitor the weather conditions to make real-time management decisions going forward. And then additionally, our supervisors and staff are always keeping up with new technology. We attend county meetings, state meetings, webinars. The road salt symposiums tomorrow will all be there, and so they're definitely always taking what they learned there, coming back to Shoreview, noodling it over, seeing whether or not it would work well for our particular cities. So as you can imagine, measuring the progress in a program like this comes with some variables. There's obviously climate variability. You don't get the same amount of snowfall every year. There's also, of course, changing salt prices if you're monitoring for the cost of everything. We do get development, which increases our road miles, which throws another wrench into that. And then, of course, resident comments and calls on the day of the event. So Shoreview, taking all that into account, we monitor how much salt is used per each truck per event. We also monitor how much is purchased annually and is left over at the end of the season. So taking all of that into account, our salt usage has decreased since we implemented all these changes starting around 2006. And even though we have decreased our salt usage, our road miles covered has increased. So here's this graph. I apologize, 2016 and 17 are not on there, although they both hover around this 500-ton mark here. So you can see from 2008, we've gone down from over 900 tons of salt to around 500, and we're staying pretty steady. So even with Katie used my take this with a grain of salt joke a little bit earlier, but even with all those variabilities, we still decreased significantly the amount of salt that we use on an annual basis. So as you can imagine, that with that large decrease in salt and the fact that we have a lot of residents that have lived in Shoreview for quite some time, they have seen differences in the way that their streets are maintained and how they look. So you do, back to those high expectations of residents, we do receive quite a few phone calls. People expect dry pavement all year round, and they expect to be able to drive 40 miles an hour on their residential streets. So that also, another wrench to get thrown in there. Most of Shoreview's major roadways are either county roads or state highways, which are maintained by Ramsey County or MnDOT respectively. So if you've got a resident that's turning off of dry pavement Lexington onto a Shoreview residential street, there's going to be a difference there, and a percentage of those people are going to pick up the phone. When they pick up the phone, they don't always call the same person, so that leads into another issue of consistent language, which we've tackled pretty well this past year, and Brooke just mentioned that model snow and ice management policy. Late in 2017, Shoreview adopted our new snow and ice management policy, which leans very heavily on that document. And it just allows us to include environmental considerations in our management decisions. So basically, the policy says that we will manage for safety, convenience, but also for our natural resources protection. So that can sometimes lead to mixed messages when you get a resident calling in and saying, I slipped through a stop sign at Mountain Victoria, you have to come out and put some more salt on the roads. And our policy says that we did what we did, and this is why, and this is what we're supposed to put down for these specific conditions. So that the applicators understand that, they definitely understand that residents value their natural resources just as much as the applicators do themselves. And in fact, even though they're not necessarily thinking about their lakes when they're sliding through a stop sign, it still matters. They're still, overall, it's an important thing. So the applicators weigh all those variables. We do go out and check every time somebody calls, but we do not always put down salt. So as you can imagine, that doesn't leave somebody happier if they've already called in upset. So to deal with that, mostly we do through outreach. And in two different forms. For peers, we do outreach like this, like today, in front of groups like this, speaking about what we're doing. We also like to get involved in diverse planning and advisory committees like, for example, our snow and ice management policy. We used a lot of the model policy, and Mark Maloney, our public works director, helped develop that policy as part of that interdisciplinary group. So we like to get involved that way. We also like to kind of get recognition for our efforts. And I apologize, I had the name or the exact wording for this award. We won an award from the Freshwater Society in 2010 for our excellence in protecting the environment through winter maintenance, something like that. But,
Environmental Leadership Award.
Yes, thank you. That's it. It's on my notes on the PowerPoint, but not here in front of me. So that's how we do our outreach for peers, for folks like yourselves. And then for residents, it looks a little different. We have a bi-monthly newsletter that comes out where we feature articles not only on what to expect on their residential roadways, but also how to reduce salt usage on their own walkway or driveway maintenance for their winter activities. We've got a lot of information up on our website, and we post periodically on social media. And then another thing that Shoreview has, which is very helpful in this aspect, is we have a citizen committee called the Environmental Quality Committee, and every year they host a speaker series event. And we've been focusing on this issue recently because it's important. And actually, I saw Tara's name on the sign-in sheet, so I never actually met Tara, but she will be speaking in We'll be speaking in Shoreview City Council chambers in 2 weeks from Wednesday about smart salting for safe roadways. So that's another way we hope to get some attendance there. And then people, once they learn why we're doing what we're doing, then maybe they aren't going to make so many angry phone calls. Maybe they'll be okay with driving 10 miles an hour slower after a snow event. So in conclusion, Shoreview attributes its successful chloride reduction program to the commitment and values of the winter maintenance staff. That's the most important factor for us. Because that importance is placed on the training and the chloride reduction in general, our applicators understand how different conditions require different application levels. They make the connections between their actions and the environment. They're constantly balancing between safety, convenience, and the environment. And that's because they feel a responsibility to Shoreview's natural resources, and they know that the residents do as well. We get more calls about trail maintenance than we do about road maintenance because people are out on a daily basis using those trails. So, and most importantly, I believe they feel supported by management in their decisions. You can go to as much training as you want, but if you know that if you're out, if some resident calls in at a certain intersection and your boss is going to send you back out to put more chloride down, you're going to put it down the first time, so you don't have to go back out. So our applicators, they really understand the science, they really buy into it, they really value it, and because of that, our managers they trust them, and they feel that support all the way up the chain. So if somebody's mad about a certain intersection, it gets all the way up to Mark, he's going to have that person's back. So that's really how we work in Shoreview. And I've got a little story behind this photo. I was digging around on our servers trying to find some pictures for today's presentation, and this is actually, as some of you may have guessed, the Halloween Blizzard of 1991. And that is the driver in our lead plow there is actually our current public works superintendent. So he's been there for 29 years. He was pretty excited that I had found this photo.
Joe? Is it Joe?
Joe, it is not Joe. No, it is Dan Curley. But Joe's our street supervisor, so he's in charge of the day-to-day as well. And I kind of went pretty fast there. Apologies. But any questions?
How about data on cost savings? So you've invested in tree wetting tanks and brine application. looking over like, I don't know, 10 years, I presume you're seeing something with cost of salt purchases.
Yes, yes, and I believe, I apologize, I've only been with the city for a year, but I believe that those purchases, Mark, were made quite a few years ago, and we've definitely made back those costs with our salt reduction savings as well.
I actually want to make a comment because I do hear the cost a lot, and trust me, salt, the price of salt is going up. There's a lot of anxiety, especially I've been on that point. But we do have to keep in mind too that at least on the state side, but I know it's true for all operators, that if we're not salty, we're out there more. So we're driving those routes more often, and we're using blades.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're using more
Yeah.
high-tech blades, which are costly, and it's just something, because I just want everyone to be realistic about it, you know, like to not, because I haven't heard, and maybe those costs are factored into some of the cost savings, and that's great, but it is something, I don't want the locals to be, you know, having these great expectations, because the way you do the job then is manpower, operate.
Right.
Right, so those trucks are out more often, they're out earlier, and they're clearing with blades. So I just wanted to make that point, that's how we do it with less salt.
Which helps lead to the point that we're not really focused on budget. We do have that luxury to be able to be not focused on budget. We gotta press that point. But I apologize, I don't have savings numbers here in front of you, but we have, there has been.
No, it's like granite countertops, you know, you'll spend more money because it's your vision goal, priority.
A question for you, or maybe anyone else in the room. In general, who are trusted sources when you're looking to, you know, write a newsletter article to your residents, or talk to your chamber of commerce and your business owners, and on how to reduce salt on that private side of things? Who might you look to in the state or nationally to have good data and facts and information to share?
Well, I know for sure we rely pretty heavily on our watershed districts. We also have members of that environmental quality resident committee that are specifically in their own field study aware of that, and they can help develop. For the private part, if there might be somebody else.
Connie Ford.
Oh, yes, of course, Ford.
Yeah, we've helped produce some of that. The watershed districts have done an amazing job. So I think that's probably the best first starting point, or Metro Watershed Partners. They have their clean water group that they have done some really good stories too.
It's definitely a little less clear once you get away from the metro area, when you get into outstate regional areas that do have fair amounts of private contracts doing salt application. It's really unclear to me as to who's going to carry the message. Is that on?
Thank you. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at too, because we definitely have, you know, and being in the metro and having this meeting here in person and knowing what resources we have in the metro, you know, we obviously have great resources here, but we do have an online audience, and GreenStep definitely goes, you know, statewide, and so thinking about how we can better facilitate those resources to our other communities, and maybe Brooke and I working with our follow-up to our cities, maybe we can come up with a good list of resources.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's my new job at the agency. They decided to have a position completely dedicated to chloride specifically, and so we're making the training statewide, and we're going to try to find what are those new needs, and hopefully we can help fill that gap.
Are there cities in greater Minnesota that have, achieved some of these improvement levels?
Yeah, we've got, like the city of St. Cloud in particular, they've been very progressive, and the training has been statewide. It's open to anyone who wants to participate. It's focused on the metro because that's where we have the majority of our partners. We do rely on that partnership in order to offer the training, but we have had several trainings in Duluth and St. Cloud. We'll have another one coming up in Rochester. So we have been getting out to greater Minnesota. We just aren't able to get it there as often right now under the current funding mechanism. It doesn't allow us to really kind of move beyond. It's a little more restrictive on where we can go with the training, but the goal is to, now that we need a new funding source, now we don't have those restrictions anymore, and we will hope to have it available statewide soon.
The assessment tool.
The assessment tool is online, and yep, everybody can use that. So that's something that anyone, even outstate, got an email from Virginia. Apparently the state of Virginia loves their tool. And they were concerned we were losing funding, and they sent an email to EPA, like, you need to help Minnesota with this tool because we love it.
Oh.
Nice, thank you. So anyone can use it.
I had a comment, and to follow up on what Ellen was touching on there, even in a community like ours, which we pride ourselves on having some very progressive thinking about environmental protection, we have an audience that has high expectations for protecting natural resources. Even still, it is incredibly difficult to push back on people who say, and I'll just point to, I picked up on Ellen's presentation. She talked about public safety and she talked about environmental, but she's picked up on another thing in local government. You saw the word convenience in there. And it's a reality that, you know, we're dealing with. Our expectations as a culture is that we can go as fast as we want, whenever we want, and we don't want anything in our way slowing us down, because we're all in a hurry, we're all so important, so on and so forth. And so that is like a third factor in the SALT equation, at least in reality in local government. We're prepared to talk about the public safety versus environmental balance that we need to have, but there's that undercurrent of high expectations for people in mobility that is also really, really difficult to push back on. And even in our community where we're set up for success on this topic, it still takes a tremendous amount of effort and courage, frankly, for your leadership in your community. Because these people that Ellen are referring to that call and they're mad because the road doesn't look like it's managed to the same level that NDOT is managing freeways, they're going to talk to an elected official, and that elected official is going to need to have a script or some talking points. And so I just wanted to get that out there for you, that it isn't as easy as perhaps we've made it look. We've had a great culture in our community to work with, but even with that great culture in place, there's still a lot of expectation that comes with it. And so when Brooke and others were working on this Twin City Chloride Management Plan, they very, very astutely engaged locals to get that reality sort of understood in the plan, because this could not come down just as a state agency, you know, mandate to locals without understanding the difficulty that we have. So that's why it's been successful.